Hello, my dear listeners. My name is Kishore Ganesh, and in this episode of the Vocal About Visuals podcast, I'll be reviewing episode 1 and 2 of Marvel's brand new superhero series, Moon Knight, starring Oscar Isaac, Ethan Hawke, and May Calamawy. New episodes of the series drop every Wednesday on Disney Plus and Disney Plus Hotstar. I'm going to review episode 1 and 2 separately, but before that, let me shoot out some general thoughts about the series as a whole. Moon Knight, from the trailers, made it clear that it was a bit different from other Marvel properties housed within the core Disney banner. For starters, it seemed a lot more viscerally violent than most Marvel films, where there was violence, of course, but it was well choreographed, stylish kind of violence. In fact, even yesterday, I mistakenly started searching for Moon Knight on Netflix instead of Disney Plus, because doesn't that seem like a better fit? All thanks to Daredevil, Jessica Jones, etc., as compared to Disney Plus. But the moment I saw Moon Knight punch that Egyptian jackal thing to death, I was convinced that maybe this clash of brands could actually work. And with all that out of the way, let's head into the reviews of the 2 episodes. Oh, before I forget, I haven't watched WandaVision or Hawkeye yet, so I don't know if Disney's transition to an edgier self has already occurred. If it has, great. But for me, coming from having watched Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki, Hit Monkey doesn't count, by the way, because it's a Hulu show and it's animated. Yes, for somebody who is coming from having watched Falcon, Winter Soldier and Loki, I still find it extremely interesting to watch these 2 brands that are stylistically different coexist. And now, here's the review of episode 1. Moon Knight's first episode distinctly feels like it's a pilot, especially from a production value standpoint. The difference in quality of CGI and even cinematography between the first and second episode was stark. Wink wink. Have a look at the small European town portion in this episode and you will know what I'm talking about. At first, I thought Marvel didn't provide enough budget for the show. Maybe they thought it was an experiment, so let's not go all out with funds. Whatever it was, when I saw the European town segment, I thought, man, these set designs seem a bit weak and amateurish. When you hold them up to the standard of Marvel, of course. And if they are not sets, but an actual town, then the cinematography was a real letdown there. Maybe it was the budget. Maybe it was Disney's reluctance on spending big on a relatively unknown Marvel property, or maybe it was even COVID. Whatever it was, it gave me the impression that this was an indie show within the tent house of a behemoth, and of course, indie projects have a charm of their own too. So this, combined with the violence, made me quite keen on the show. And I should say, I was not let down by episode 1. Steven Grant's bumbling antics and the show's editing did create an atmosphere of chaos throughout this episode, but maybe that was by choice, because Steven Grant as an individual is going through a period of great chaos, and the show nails the transfer of that mood to the audience. Either intentionally or unintentionally, Oscar Isaac's English accent also managed to create a sense of unease in me, and that also went quite well with the whole mood of the show. Basically, the first 80% of this episode was all set up, and Moon Knight appearing and murdering the jackal in the museum is the punchline and the setup to the next episode. And it is indeed a very good setup to episode 2. Moving on to the review of episode 2 now. In this episode, the story moves on to establish the main goal of Grant, aka Moon Knight, and also establishes his allies and the villains. Ethan Hawke was introduced in episode 1, but here we see the psychopathic cult leader in fine form. This episode, compared to the first, also felt much better from a production value standpoint and made me feel as though Marvel was convinced that they have a viable hit on their hands post watching episode 1. We also do away with Steven's pathetic life, and I don't mean pathetic in a disparaging manner, and enter into the main quest of the season/series. Oscar Isaac comes to form in this episode, where he manages to bring to life 2 different characters on screen brilliantly. May Calamawy adds much needed stability to both the narrative and Oscar's character, Grant. All cards are on the table for Grant, and the story gets nicely up to speed to rush forth from episode 3 onwards. So episode 2 is much better than episode 1 and promises a lot of exciting events in the upcoming episodes. Finally, all I can say is, going by these 2 episodes, Moon Knight does seem promising, but let's see what the future episodes hold for us. Once again, my name is Kishore Ganesh. This is the Vocal About Visuals podcast, and thank you, my dear listeners, for your time and for listening. It will be greatly appreciated if you can follow this podcast on your preferred podcast platforms and also subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. Oh, before I leave, I wanted to share a fun fact. I wanted to record this podcast in the midst of nature at the base of a hill, but I reached the spot a bit late. It was already sunset at that point of time, and the authorities in the area asked me to get out. So I wrote this podcast at the base of a hill and I'm recording it in my house. So we start small and hopefully I get to do that eventually. And yeah, that's about it from me for this episode. Talk to you guys in the next one.